Wala tayong may mga taong nagkuntsabahan upang humantong tayo sa sitwasyong ito. Isang sitwasyong walang agarang solusyon. Ilan po sa kanila ay nakikita natin, habang ang iba naman ay nagkukubli pa rin sa dilim.
Patunayan po niya na meron kaming kasabwat. Kung may mga kasabwat man kami, yun po ay mga taong bayan.
We don't have the means. We don't have the airplane. We don't have the boat and everything.
They are doing this on their own, bringing their own provisions, bringing their own logistical requirements.
Alam mo naman na hindi ako nag-aakusa ng kung sino man kung wala akong tanga na ebidensya. So, hintayin lang po natin yung resulta ng investigasyon.
Because they tampered with the evidence during the investigation. These PCG officers and personnel falsified a gunnery report which reduced the rounds of ammunition used in the incident by about 72 rounds.
We think that the government of the Philippines was not able to provide a proper response to our 4 requests. Therefore, our government, starting from 0 o'clock today, will take 3 sanction measures.
Parang pinagsasamantalahan ng Taiwan ngayon itong issue na ito para magkaroon ng isang kasunduan na wala naman silang karapatan na pumasok, no, yung fishing agreement na sinasabi nila. Sa larangan ng international law, they're only entitled to compensation and an apology.
Hindi kailangan ng source code to run the elections. Yung source code is only for purposes of the political parties and interested groups. Successful itong 2013. It is an improved system or improved elections compared to 2010.
Total abolition, because regardless of what you call it, it's still pork barrel.
Para maramdaman ng gobyerno kung ano ang reklamo ng tao.
Every time maririnig ko the name of the Poles and the congressman involved, mukha nang dinuguan yung loob ko sa
Ayon kay Bert Benher, inaalok mo raw ang mga lawmakers ng mga kickbacks na manggagaling sa kanilang PIDA. Totoo po ba ito?
Hindi po totoo. Hindi po totoo. Hindi po totoo.
Sisinungaling siya kasi bago po ako pumasok, 2002, meron na siyang mga kliyente at nag-form nauna na po nag-form ang 3 NGO na nag-transact na.
Hindi po totoo.
10 billion ang inakaw nila in 10 years time. Biro mong 10 billion? Kung ano sanang pagkain nabigay noon or healthcare.
Hindi po totoo.
Pagnanakaw ang tunay na ugat ng isyong ito. Iyan po ang usapang pilit nilang tinatabunan matapos mabisto ang kanilang kalokohan.
Kaya naman ng isang LGU, ang ibang mga bagay, ay yung puwersa ng national government ay kailanganin din at kinakailangan sa iba pang mga lugar. No? So doon, sa pagpupulong, ay sinabi ng city government, kaya na nila yung pagdidistribute.
Because I could not understand up to that day. In fact, up to today, we're still retrieving bodies, 60 to 80 bodies a day. And I wanted additional help for that from the very beginning. And I was not getting that help. And we kept begging for more help. In fact, I even asked the president directly the second time we met. I was willing to give in to anything as long as I get the help for my people. Because we were practically begging already. And I said, this is only temporary.
Kasi ang gusto ko nga sabihin, ang dami nang tumulong. Ba't di natin yun ang patampukin? Lahat tumulong. We're moving as a nation. Mukhang humuhupa na ang emergency may mga ibang elemento nang pumapasok, may puwang na para mamulitika. Ang aking pakiusap lang, malayo pa ho tayo para sa pagbabangon ng ating mga mamamayan. Doon ho muna tayo tumutok. Pagtulong sa mga mamamayan na bumangon.
It's been a very busy year for media as well as for Filipinos in both good and bad ways. You've had a slew of disasters and scandals which have tested the Filipinos, but it's also enabled Filipinos to shine as well. This year, nakita mo na mga tao gumagalaw. You saw that with the pork barrel issue. For so many years, yung pork barrel issue was confined as an issue that just interested people who like to pick through the numbers. Ito yung mga tipong accountants, mga public finance interested people. Kung yung taong bayan, walang particular na interest sa pork barrel. Ngayon, biglang lahat gustong maging expert sa pork barrel, which is a good thing. It's now very active in social media. And nakita mo nga yung million person march, yung sa Luneta, and yung EDSA Tayo march. Biglang nabuhay ng dugo ang Pilipino. And I suppose I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing na kailangan ng disaster at scandal para ang tao mabuhay ng dugo.
Good evening. You're watching News Cafe on the Solar News Channel. Sitting in for Jing Magsaysay, I'm Mitzi Borromeo. Another year is ending, and we are on our way to welcoming a new one. Tonight, we will discuss the biggest issues that have rocked 2013 and how it will affect the income. Joining me now are Vergel Santos, publisher and editorial board chairman of Business World, and the trustee of the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility, and Carlos Celdran, artist, activist, and a social media personality. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you for being on the show.
A pleasure.
Right, so it's another end of the year. We're coming to a new one. You're here to discuss the year that was. Now, let's start with Vergel. What do you think were some of the immediate highlights for you? Maybe one of the ones you want to start off with.
Well, the earthquake, the typhoon,
Of course.
pork barrel, of course. It was a year that was tragic, to say the least.
Yes.
And I've never seen anything like it.
Unforgettable.
Come to think of it.
So that's going to set the scene for tonight. Carlos?
Yeah, I would say it's almost the same thing. Maybe we can throw in some more like sort of lowlights like Ann Curtis's slapping incident and things like that. But other than that, I think you're right. It's been mostly tragic on the most part.
As media practitioners in different
I would never say I practice media. No. Real journalists will get mad.
Well, whatever media you might choose, how do you think Filipinos have reacted to this in whatever sort of media they've had? I mean, do you think, has it been too much? Have we not spoken about certain issues too much? Just your general feel on this matter.
Filipinos do react as these things come. It's not as if they could brace themselves for anything.
We're very emotional.
We're not that kind of nation. We don't have that kind of luxury. It just happens and we all adapt to whatever happens. It is the reality of our existence, it seems to me. That's why we are revealed for our vulnerabilities, for our ineptitudes, for our perversities. It's because that's how we are.
Right.
We don't have the time. We don't have the means to really prepare for these things.
And so it's good after it happens, we have to make sense of it and talk about it.
Yeah, and destiny is your fate. I mean, or what you call,
Explain.
geography is destiny, right? Geography is destiny. And
Yes.
just us being in this particular position in the equator, considering who our neighbors are, of
Right.
course we'll have conflicts with China. Of course we will have typhoons coming in. Of course there will be earthquakes. Of course, everything that's been happening is just always a kind of part of the circumstance of our environment.
Well, in the world, apparently, we are the third most vulnerable because of our situation, no? To
It's a
natural
situation, and
disasters.
even after the earthquake happened and Yolanda happened, in most parts of the Philippines, the mail was still being delivered. Airplanes still arrived at the airport.
Yeah.
I mean, one can call it resilience, or one could be like in a state of absolute and utter denial.
Right.
But either way, it is part of being who we are.
Yes.
Right.
And speaking of who we are, if we look at media practitioners, we see Verhel that you come more from the traditional media, print. Carlos is now you're really making waves in social media. So they say that media is the fourth estate, watchdogs, right, of government. And now they're saying it's moving to citizen journalism.
Yeah, but also I have to say, even though I might call myself a citizen journalist or blogger, I'm beginning to hate that word a lot. The citizen cannot claim to be media. I mean, it's like being an artist or being a sculptor. I'm sorry, but there are some that separate the chaff from the real practitioners. And I think that there's some sort of code of ethics that real journalists have that a lot of social media people, I mean, a lot of the times that happen now, a lot of the mistakes have been seeing, like especially Corriente for some of the stories of the DSWD, some of the stories of like Be Nice stickers, or even this latest one of the British aid being stolen, was spread about by citizen bloggers, right? And a lot of them turned out to be false.
Right.
So, I mean, like, I like the empowerment of it all, but we still have a long way to go in terms of monitoring ourselves.
Verhel, what do you think?
Journalism is an organized and vetted practice. You just don't become a journalist. I don't think so. Like any profession, there are certain rigors that one goes through for one to be able to call oneself a journalist. That's the difference between between a citizen who is a blogger and a journalist. So, well, that said, anyway, it seems to me there's a great deal of the way our own people look at things is so fatalistic, I think, and it is all part of the operating culture that somehow contributes to the hindering of progress.
Well, culture,
in
you
this country.
bring up culture. Let's talk about
Culture
that.
it's an operating culture.
So you're saying that our Filipino culture can also lead to certain problems?
I think it's the operating culture more than anything else.
Yes.
That has brought us to this pass.
So this is patronage politics.
Yes, patronage. Yeah.
What do you think? In your case, of course, well, we'll take it case by case. For example,
which specific issue?
I wanted to ask you about the reproductive health bill. We know that you're quite familiar with that issue. Let's talk about your case, for example. How do you think the media handle that, and how is the government?
Well, just like everything else, it's kind of losing. Well, it's not a very. I mean, we've already passed the sexy point of the Damaso incident. Me being in the church, the whole brouhaha, and I'm actually kind of glad that media and the attention span of the Filipino, which is notorious being even that shorter for newborn kitten, was actually able to keep attention on the reproductive health bill from 2010 until it was passed this year. And to keep it in the media headlines, it was pretty much in the headlines until it passed in Congress, right? Now that it's the Supreme Court, it's kind of like losing steam. But I think all eyes will be on it when push comes to shove and the Supreme Court decision will happen. I mean, everybody's watching it. I mean, it's not like the days of Paco Larrañaga or the days of like Hubert Webb back then where media only went one way. Now we're actually watching Supreme Court decisions and everything done in real time.
So do you think it will be passed?
Yeah, I don't know. We can't say anything. I just hope it will be passed.
I just wonder what the liberal predisposition of the present Pope, how it might impact on the whole issue.
It will have a big influence, yes.
Yeah, because it seems clear to me that this Pope.
Interesting times,
yes, would not be.
Yeah, no, he has to. I mean, the man on the top when it comes to the Vatican has changed, but the sort of like the minions below him, I don't think are actually quite as enlightened.
Because it's culture.
Because it's culture. You can't change hundreds and hundreds of years of power differential. You know,
will take time. I mean,
and the politics of patronage started there. And just carried on by the next colonialists and so on and so forth. Now the culture is being kept alive by the powers that be, the native powers that be. It's been that way. So I don't know. If you ask me, I wouldn't know myself how do you change culture?
Well, that's a good question.
Well, this comes out in the other cases. If we look, for example, at the Zamboanga crisis, or the Bohol earthquake, the way that the government handled these issues, this is what you're saying, the culture kind of really paints.
But that's also, the whole tragedy has been compounded by the extent of poverty in this country.
Yeah.
You know, its extent of poverty, and the huge gap between those who have and those who haven't.
Right.
We very well see that the poor are always on the weeping end of things.
Of everything.
That gap is getting bigger, yes. So of course, with the Yolanda typhoon, we saw so much media coverage. I mean, everyone has been glued to their screens, and who can forget the coverage of CNN? Because CNN was on it, you know, hour after hour. And remember this controversial stance that people said Anderson Cooper of CNN took. What are your thoughts on that? There was government was very critical about it.
Well, in the first place, Anderson Cooper happens to be a Vanderbilt, and you can understand from what culture he might be coming from.
Yeah.
And
also, I mean, he was one of the first to sort of create a cross-section between show business and journalism. I mean, he's practically the poster boy who's half Oprah and half Barbara Walters. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is a man who drinks from both wells. So the sort of like scandalization and the sort of like overacting of what happened, I have to say, did help bring in more donations.
Do you think he was overacting? Was he over, or do you think he was reporting as it was?
I mean, I work with the government sometimes. I work with DSWD before during the Ondoy crisis and everything like that. I just know the kind of limitations. Especially when you also look at the limitations of a government that just had an earthquake 2 weeks before. And then before that, you also have a war going on down in Mindanao. And meanwhile, we have to keep the same DSWD services going for orphans, for other places that are going on in the Philippines. I mean, it's hard to explain this to Anderson Cooper that, you know, it's not that the Philippines has bad intentions. It's not like the Philippine government is maliciously doing anything to do this, right? And it painted a picture that somehow the inadequacies of the Philippine government were of its own doing, which I found kind of unfair.
And he did compare the Philippines to Japan, which
really, and also you're looking at also the way that CNN now and all this modern news will always go faster than the relief plane. You're only bringing 3 or 4 journalists and camera. If you're going to bring in an entire shipload of food on a C-130 on a one-strip airport in Tacloban that was already under capacity even before the typhoon. I mean, I can see where people in the government could get mad at Anderson Cooper for doing it. But at the end of the day, Anderson Cooper did bring a lot of money in terms of donations.
You can always expect a parachute journalist to be out of perspective, you know, because you come from another culture, and you are a spot journalist, meaning what you see, you simply describe, and what you see is only what you see. And therefore, you do not have the breadth of view of, say, a native long-time observer, or someone who has done extensive homework before coming. And
or even sort of getting people who understand the locale. I mean, if you compare the coverage of Al Jazeera and compare the coverage of CNN, Al Jazeera had people on the ground who were from the Philippines, already familiar with the Philippine context and could explain things. I mean, when you're looking at the way CNN, it was just kind of like a tourist coming in and being shocked about everything that was going on. So I mean, these are two different styles.
But that is not to say that there are no official shortcomings. There are.
Yeah, of course.
Well, again, we're seeing the cultural characteristics of the different regions, aren't we? That's the American coverage, and we have
Al Jazeera, which is actually, I have to say, one of the best coverage of the Yolanda event among all of them.
Well, very interesting talk we're having, but we will continue. Right now, we have to take a short break. We have a lot to discuss with our guests, but right now, we will take a short break. News Cafe will return after these messages.
In my mind, the big issue that seemed to have cropped up with the Anderson Cooper story was that this is Anderson Cooper, he's with CNN, he's a big name, this is an international audience, and it makes us look bad. But journalism is not about making people look good. It's about telling people what to do and what could be done and what should be done. And that was his job. And the way he worded his stories were not particularly bad. I mean, he talked to people, and the same reflections came out of these people. Hindi naman siya nag-invento. I would have faulted him if he just stayed in Manila and got his stories from Facebook or Twitter. No, he was on the ground. Basically kasi, PDAF is just, pork barrel of congressmen and senators and the vice president. That is it. But the president has his own pork barrel, and there are other lump sum funds kung saan walang accountability, walang transparency, at madaling kumurakot kung gugustuhin nila. Whether media has covered that sufficiently, we'd always like to say that there's room for more improvement. We have made the first initial steps, which is a good thing. The next question is, of course, will we want to take it further? Will we be able to get people interested pa rin to look at pork barrel in the bigger sense of the word? That's a factor of our being so personality oriented eh. Meron tayong pwedeng kukuyugin natin. And then we forget the issue. We forget about pork barrel. We forget about lump sum funds. We just remember Janet Napoles. So that is our concern there. We have to move the discussion forward. It's not just Napoles. It is about lump sums. It's about transparency. It's about accountability. It's about our money.
You are still watching News Cafe on the Solar News Channel, and we're still with our guests, Vergel Santos and Carlos Sildran. So we were talking about Typhoon Yolanda and how it's been handled in the media. Right now, we're still getting aid from all around the world, and the government is begging for loans, for more aid. Do you think that this makes our government incompetent? Vergel, what do you think?
This definitely makes us poor, which we are. Now, I don't know about begging. I mean, it seems to me that we ask for loans at all. These are something that we do deserve, given what has happened to us, and given the history of exploitation we've been put through. I mean, right. So we only deserve it. But what is clear enough is that we are poor, and reconstruction will require so much that we definitely will have to undertake that in cooperation with institutions and other nations.
Carlos, what are your thoughts on?
I think it's just us having to beg is evidence of a larger problem that's going on here, and that's the lack of money that's circulating within our economy. I mean, just the fact that we're already asking for aid and for loans, even when there isn't a typhoon, right? I mean, and I guess it's also indicated that, I mean, if one just really analyzes, the Philippines is a closed economy. It is not really easy for foreign direct investment to come here. I mean, as we know with provisions of the Constitution of 1987. And I think that this lack of inflow coming in directly after 30 years since 1987, or almost 30 years since 1987 when the Constitution was written, we're seeing the damage done of not having enough money being pumped into our economy. That we're actually depending upon people who have the most money in our economy, like say the oligarchs or the tycoons or whatever, to keep the entire country afloat. And we can't depend upon this small pool of oligarchs to keep the country flowing, especially when it comes to reconstruction, and especially when it comes to providing jobs for all these people that have been replaced. Not everybody can work at SM, and not everybody can sell a condo. Not everybody can learn English. What we really need to do is just really restructure our economy to allow more direct investment to come in, to create more manufacturing jobs and service jobs among these people. So if anything, I hope that the president sees from this problem of having to beg people after this project is how to restructure an economy that we become less dependent on this even after Yolanda.
So we need to change a lot lot of things, no?
Yeah, especially the economic provisions.
Possibly we need certain changes.
Yes.
But this seems to me less a matter of law or rule than it is of culture. I mean, if you look at the codes and laws that we have, we're fine. I mean, we're fine. It is not these things that hinder investment at all. It is culture. It is the way we have structured ourselves. We were not structured by law, by the way, or the Constitution or anything like that. We have made ourselves the way we are.
Right.
And given the gulf between the haves and the have-nots, you know very well that what we have here is a concentration of wealth and opportunities in the hands of less than 1%. Less than 1%. It has nothing to do with the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't say it.
And this is clearly seen right now.
It is a culture of patronage.
Yes.
It is a culture that has allowed these people to accumulate that kind of wealth. It's nothing to do with anything else.
And this is what we've seen with the pork barrel scam.
No, it's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same. Nothing to do with with that at all. Well, the impression is given that it has to do with that in certain cases, precisely because we are kept, our attention is diverted from the real issue, which is culture. It is culture.
Yeah. Well, how are Filipinos going to understand this? There's a lot of education involved.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think also, as culture being the problem, culture will also be the solution, right? I mean, to change a Filipino, you have to make the Filipino want to change. You know, I agree with you that behaviors are set about because of years and years of ingraining these sorts of behaviors. But also these sort of behaviors can change as well, as long as you create a setting where these things can change. I.e., maybe, okay, like if people are always jaywalking, give people better overpasses, give people more accesses to cross the road, that they don't need to break the law. If we need more foreign direct investors, I mean, instead of coming up with a dummy company and a 60% person, stop making foreign investors do bad things, like create a dummy company in order to stay in the Philippines.
Yeah.
So basically what I think, what we need to do is streamline our laws and create a better environment will make Filipinos want to change for the better. But until we start looking at the very foundations of what runs us as a nation and what runs us as a people, including religion, including social aspects, including the kind of things that we like to watch on TV, until we start questioning all of that, it'll just be status quo.
Well, I have a question to that. How do we make these real changes happen?
Education.
For example,
Education.
Well, education. But yes.
Business people will always make money, whatever the laws are like.
Yeah.
Business people will make money. In Marcos's time, we had business people who make money. It makes no laws didn't make any difference. Even the nature of government didn't make much difference. But education should make a difference because we're talking here about culture. Unless this nation knows where they have come from, why they have become what they have become, we will never know. And if I've had a chance to speak with younger people. I always try to do that because I'd like to think that my time is past and this nation will be passed on inheritors. And the young people, probably people 40 and under, would be inheriting this patch of earth. And if they have no understanding of these things, I mean, history, the story of their own nation, that's where you proceed. Understanding proceeds from that.
Yes.
Why understanding anything in life would be understanding how you have become what you have become until you have understood that.
Yeah.
You will never be able to set yourself straight. So this is I think what we need to do. And right now, if you look at our history is full of contradictions and untruths
Fiction.
and things like that. How do you go about
Actually, stranger
so
than
the first
reality
thing
stranger
is
than
to
fiction.
set the text straight.
Yeah.
It's really
Or what I try to do in
big
my own
job.
tour, I try to find a common story that everybody wants to agree upon.
So you can embellish a little bit.
Well, not embellish a little bit, but a lot of Philippine history does come from some sort of like guesswork, just by looking at the factors that were going on. You know, like how did people get here? Oh, they must have come on a boat. I mean, you know, there was a landmass. People are still arguing over which one or the other, so one can't really say what it is. But the best I guess we can do is just find a common story that unites us.
Yes.
You know, instead of finding a common story or different stories that divide us. I mean, I'm not saying that nationalism is the way for us to go, because looking at Hitler's Germany, we can see how nationalism can also take a very, very wrong turn in any nation. But I guess, but I do agree with him that learning about one's own history creates a self-awareness,
Right.
which we seem to lack in this country. And so that's the first step. Understand your history, understand yourself.
Well, we learn about history also through the present. So I'd like to talk about the pork barrel case again, the PDAF and the DAP. Right now, the young generation is learning a lot about culture and our history through the current bicameral hearing, no?
Constitution once again, here we go.
Yeah, so here we go. We're seeing, well, this is ingrained in our culture. And this has been happening over the years.
No,
Now it's blatant.
It's
been
history and
happening.
culture.
What are your thoughts on the investigation and how it's been carried out? Rahel first? Yes.
Well, we investigate and investigate and investigate. We've been doing this, but and people are looking for certain people, big enough people to go to jail.
Happen?
This is what we always ask. Okay, we have been investigating, we have been looking at these things fairly extensively in this case. In fact, we've been naming names, but still people are asking whether anyone would go to jail. Any big enough fish would go to jail.
Someone
Why?
has to get punished.
This remark by itself reflects a huge, the great doubt among our people. Why? Because there is a chain of culture and subcultures in this case. First, there's a culture of patronage, and then this culture is funded by a subculture of corruption, and then because no one among the corrupt goes to jail anyway, so there is a culture of impunity. So this is how it is. So that people have become truly mistrustful.
So even if the Supreme Court has declared the PDAF unconstitutional, do you think that's not really going to make a difference?
Well, that's another thing. But you see, when this happens, people, the reflex remark is that good. So people who will run for Congress would be people who will not be interested in pork barrel. But that's not true. I mean, people who will run for Congress would be people who would like to protect their wealth. Because
still interests.
So still,
which is also a result of having a very faulty presidential system. Once again, I mean, I may sound like a broken record, and many people may disagree with you. It all harks back once again to being the Constitution of the Philippines. Let's look at the history first of the PDAF. How did it happen? People are screaming about it. It happened during Cory Aquino's time. Remember, we changed from being a parliamentary system into a presidential system, and by the third year of her being in power, everybody wanted to kick her out. Okay, and so that is one of the hallmarks of having a presidential system that we see with the United States. When you have all these people together, you create this thing called gridlock.
Right.
And what happens in the States, what happens in gridlock, is that the government shuts down until something fixes up. Here, when that happened to Cory Aquino, what she did is she created something that'll keep everybody happy called the Countrywide Development Fund, which is basically giving all of this free allowances to every little person. So she was able to complete her term. And then only recently, it was changed from Countrywide Development to PDAF. So basically, looking at a law that Cory Aquino created that actually makes this legal theft.
Right.
So no matter what you do and no matter what you can scream about, it's going to be very hard to pinpoint everything because basically these guys are given carte blanche to steal the country blind. Some people were able to do it, some people did not do it. Now, my solution would be is to create a situation where having conflicts in government would lead to less gridlock. And that's when I think a parliamentary system would probably be more suitable to a country like the Philippines. Because it doesn't depend on patronage politics, so it doesn't depend on personality politics so much, it's party politics. It's either liberal or whatever the name of the other party is, nationalista, okay? Not air up, individual having 20,000 people running for only one position. But then again, that's me and I'm crazy.
Right.
No, but cultures and parties are not necessarily established by law. I mean, if you will note, PDAF, pork barrel, has in fact been disallowed, disauthorized under the same constitution. In fact, under the very same system that we may be trying to change.
What are we doing? Yes.
So to me, it's nothing to do with that. And the problem is not gridlock. The problem is conspiracy. Gridlock is something else. Gridlock is something you will suffer because of party intransigence. But culture is something else. Culture is about conspiracies, conspiracies of class, conspiracies of the patron class, of the political class against the underclasses.
Right.
So it's culture, but this was established by the Constitution.
Yeah.
It was established by the life that handed us by colonial masters. We have not, all presidents of this country have been operating under certain colonial control.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about that. I'll have to stop you there for now, gentlemen. We'll get back to that. Let's take another short break. News Cafe will return, so stay tuned.
News anchors in this country have tended to stray into commentary. Now, we've seen a lot of that over radio, but it's spilled over as well into television. And it has become more glaring in television. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Well, there are those who say that Filipinos like to have a dose of opinion in their news. Personally, I think that's something that we have to address and correct. Sa dyaryo, malinaw ang atian eh. Sa dyaryo, meron kang editorial page. Lahat yan opinion. Lahat yan kolumnista. Tapos, meron kang news page. Lahat yan dapat straight facts. Kung meron mang analysis dyan, it is labeled as analysis. Ang problema mo, marami sa mga, basically, taong bayan, they cannot make the distinction between commentary and news. You would realize that kasi you'd hear people talk about it na paghahalo nila yung komentaryo ng komentarista at ang balitang inano niya, and they perceive that as gospel truth. There's been a blurring of the lines between news and commentary in this country. There's been a blurring of the lines between politics and journalism in this country. And as well, there's been a blurring of the lines between journalism and entertainment in this country.
You're still watching News Cafe on the Solar News Channel, and we still have with us Vergel Santos and Carlos Siljan. Well, we're having very interesting discussions tonight. Now, we were just talking about gridlock, conspiracy. It sounds like a thriller, huh? So this is what maybe the current generations are not aware of, that this is so ingrained in our history, no? Yes. So you were just talking about colonizers. Carlos, you were continuing, or Vergel. We have colonizer, what did you call it? Baggage from our colonizers.
Yes. Post-colonial mentality. We've hit from being a colonized culture to being the people who colonize ourselves. You are your own maid. I mean, in this country, the whole world looks at Filipinos. I'm sorry, but you're Zobel, and you're going there as Manang Daidai in Hong Kong. I'm sorry, Zobel and Manang Daidai in the eyes of the world are the same person. And so we have to start acting and giving each other the respect that each person has to give each other the same dignity in this country. The problem with this country is the upper classes and the oligarchs, I just love using that word, do not give dignity to their fellow Filipino. And instead, what they choose is to lock themselves up in these places called Forbes Park, create more culture mentality, the new Intramuros, and we perpetuate this culture of poverty.
It really goes back to colonial times, really. Even before we could even realize that this has been happening to us, came a native dictator and stopped us. So, and then after that, what have we had? We have only accidental and fraudulent presidencies. After that, accidental and president. Cory was an accidental president. Ramos, an extension of the same accident. Raps was, to a certain extent, a fraudulent presidency. Why? Because he rode on a vote of people who thought he was what they saw in the movies. You know? And then when he was gone, another accident, and so we had Gloria. And then her election, another fraudulent one. And then
literally.
Yeah.
Bad
and this
movie,
one fraudulent.
or bad recurring dream.
A fraudulent vote. And then after that, another accident.
Right.
Yeah.
I know.
So it seems like a vicious cycle.
It is.
I mean, okay, we'll take a bit of time to get through this. Now,
Yeah, because I don't think democracy works for societies that are not completely self-actualized. If a person is not educated enough, not fed well enough, not socially accepted enough, if they did not reach the top of that Maslow hierarchy of needs, how this person can make a regular decision on a basis of day, how much more can they make a decision in choosing who to lead them and who to create the dreams and things for the country?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we should stop being a democracy, but I think that there's just some ways that we should start looking at ourselves and start reanalyzing what is this thing that we have called democracy? What is the rule? What does it mean to have the rule in the Philippines? Who is the majority? The majority of people in power, or the majority of people who are just majority in numbers?
yeah,
I mean, it's very different.
very deep insights to be made as we come to the end of the year. Now, let's look at the year coming, or the years coming. 2016 elections are coming up. What are your fearless predictions for that? Any thoughts? Or...
Well, I'm waiting for another accident.
Oh no.
Yeah, same here. So like Grace Poe. And Curtis could run for president if she does maybe she'd do something interesting enough.
Really don't know. I mean,
You think maybe that was a campaign?
I don't
going on
know
recently?
if I don't know. The Marcuses will make a comeback again as usual.
they probably will.
There's a lot to watch out for.
They've never gone away.
What do you think about the current administration? So let's look at Pinoy. His current administration vis-a-vis the tragedies. How has he handled it? What is he going to be known for? What do you think?
I don't know. Truth be told, I'm not as much of a Noynoy hater as I used to be. And I'm actually going to cut this president a lot of slack, considering the factors that were given around. He's as charming as a box of rocks. But the thing is, you don't need charm to run a nation and function properly, which he probably isn't doing as well. But we could be, we could have been much worse.
I'll grant him to be purer-hearted than the others.
Yes.
But a pure heart is not all that is.
That's right.
that is required.
Sometimes the heart isn't
Yes,
enough.
yes, it's not enough.
As his mother showed as well. It seems
Yeah,
to be a hallmark of that family.
so it's not that. And there is a case can be made about his doubtful sense of judgment because he has surrounded himself with dubious characters himself. You know,
Compared
so
to past administrations, they're far. I think he's surrounded himself more with incompetent characters than dubious. Compared to the past administration, I mean, come on, it was a scary show going on in some of the past administrations. Who'd be surrounding the tables in Malacanang? I think, well, the economy is doing fine. He gave me the RH bill. I have very little complaint when it comes to very big picture. I'm just hoping that there is some form of true reform that can happen. Because all I'm seeing is that, okay, there's a lot of sort of little reforms happening here, even with the RH bill. But the second that you're gone, we can just revert back to being exactly the same thing if we got that man, B9, into the palace again. We could revert back to the dark ages one more time.
Right.
So I don't know. One can say what we can say right now.
Yes.
But you know what? 2016 is really anybody's game, and we could just really go back 10 steps.
And this is the problem, even with media, you know, when people stop discussing a certain issue, it seems the world forgets. You know, what happened to Maguindanao? 4 years on, we don't hear much about it. Maybe when the... Sorry, what's that?
Patronage?
That's right, patronage. I mean, when the coverage in Typhoon Yolanda stops, are people going to forget?
Exactly.
So what is the government doing when no one's looking?
Yes.
Well, it's also responsible. Media is stronger than any government, and it's really the roles of ABS-CBN, Solar, TV5, GMA Channel 7 to also stop looking so hard at their bottom line and advertising peso and really doing stuff. Because if there's any way we could communicate with these people out in the middle of nowhere, it is these big stations. And I think all of these big stations are not doing as much when it comes to social responsibility. They're more reactionary when it comes to Typhoon. They really can come with true cultural and mental change that they have the power to. We're watching far too much stupid TV on all of these channels. I'm sorry.
No, the media...
And then these are the people actually that we can really see and pinpoint who can actually to volunteer. I mean, the media can regulate itself. I mean, they really can. They just have to stop looking at that stupid advertising peso and start giving me real intelligent shows.
No, and also the media themselves need to be put through the test of sensitive and informed ownership.
Yes.
You know, because whatever you say, the owners have the last say.
Right.
Now, I don't mind decent compromises being made between editors and owners. I mean, but decent compromises are one thing, and other compromises are another. So even the media today, and surely given the increasing costs of media operations and publishing, the media cannot escape big capitalists.
No.
This one. So you
media
will
has
have
to censor also
yes, that's
their
right.
own
So
work.
what we have actually is not media freedom. We only have
Media
pluralism.
capitalism.
Pluralism. Only that's just about the only thing guaranteed here. That we have this many voices, but not independent voices necessarily. This is we should look at all these things as well.
Which reminds me, and that in relation to the freedom of information,
Yeah.
what do you think about that? Will that
it's a dead proposal. Like if you ask me, why? Because how would you expect the people who themselves are the potential targets of a law to pass this law? I mean, you cannot.
Well, they passed the anti-dynasty bill. That was pretty much targeted for themselves as well. Miracles do happen, but you're right. I doubt it. You're right.
No, if any media practitioner would,
Yeah, well,
would,
that's where,
would
you
ask
know,
me,
perhaps the
but I'd like to think that they've been able to operate fairly nicely without the freedom of information with all this 50 years. So why should I need one now? But of course, that is not to say that a law such as that could not reinforce freedom in general in this society. Of course, it should.
Right.
It should. But still, I would, as a journalist, rather raise my professional skills and my own level of understanding of my society and the disciplines that govern life in this society than wait for the passage of the...
So earn those 10,000 hours and improve our skills, right? In the media, that's what we should work.
That's exactly.
You can't just,
Better.
troll through the internet.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Google for your, your skills.
No, but it's very important as well, the internet, in terms of coming up with numbers. Like, I would not have the support in getting rid of the coal plant of the MCI, in fighting the Torre de Manila of the MCI.
Yeah.
I say the MCI a lot. I wouldn't be able to fight this big responsible business without the voice of the internet, because people like the MCI are exactly what I say kind of holds media down. When you have companies that big that compromise on advertising, a story can be killed.
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to get real stories on SM. It's hard to get real stories on what's really going on with lots of these larger corporations because of the advertising dollar. But you cannot, these people, even though they have an internet presence, does not necessarily mean that they will be liked, literally and figuratively, right? So that's why we have to keep the internet free. It's really the third way. It may not be the best way, it's not usually the most responsible way, nor the most elegant way, but it's the only other way aside from traditional media.
Right. And if we're looking, well, you were talking about culture earlier and change. When we look at the new year, we think of change. Now, we were talking about the Constitution earlier, and I know you both have different views. You're for charter change, aren't you,
absolutely.
Carlos? Why do you think that? Why you prefer to see that happening in the next
Oh
few
yeah,
years
I mean,
or so,
for me, the charter, well, specifically the provisions that I see in there that I would like to see is the parliamentary system, or the sort of stream, like getting rid of this thing called Senate, because I have no idea who these people are or who they're representing. Because apparently they're not representing Mindanao or Luzon, I mean, they're just representing, I guess, showbiz, big families, and more showbiz. That, I would like to see that change, and the 60-40 economic business profit, not even land ownership. I just think it would be nice if foreigners can come here and open small businesses, because that 60-40 is an enemy to small and medium enterprise.
Right.
That's it.
Verhel, your thoughts?
Well, if you look at England, England has United Kingdom. It has a queen. It has a House of Lords, representing who? Royalty. And it is a House of Commons. It doesn't have a written constitution, but it's fine. I mean, it's not. And then look at it is always, the Soviet constitution is always held up as an example. And they say that if you look at it as a piece of paper, it is terrific. So to me, a constitution is nothing more than mere theory at this point, you know. And I wonder whether a new one would only add to the confusion. But my bet would be on education all the way. And education focused on making the younger people who will inherit this patch of earth know where the nation came from. I mean, the true story of the nation, because until then, you wouldn't be able to, it's coming to terms with the nation's life.
Right.
You know, which I think
That's a nice message. And at this time of the year, we're coming to terms with all our own lives, right? And wonderful food for thought for our viewers. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here again. And
thanks,
we look
Mitzi.
forward to having you again in the future for more hot discussion.
Pleasure.
So all the best to you for the new year.
To you too.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to all our guests for being here tonight. Join us again next Thursday for another round of discussion here on News Cafe. Sitting in for Jing Magsaysay, I'm Mitzi Borromeo. Good night.
Sa bukod, hindi na ba nakasalanan ng video?